Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Burnt Pancakes podcast. I'm your host, Katie Fensky, and I'm reminding moms that everyone burns their first pancake. Today's guest is Esther Avante. She is a weight loss coach, and she helps moms stop being all or nothing and lose weight easily and sustainably. I can be the first to say that since having my third, this weight loss journey, this getting my body back thing has been kind of a struggle, and it just has felt overwhelming at times. I absolutely loved this conversation with Esther. Not only is she a mom and she gets what it's like to not have a ton of time to spend hours working out and meal prepping, but she was able to answer a lot of like diet questions that I had. I really wanted to know about some of these things that you're hearing. And honestly, there is a lot of conflicting information about dieting and weight loss and healthy living. And so she was able to give me very clear answers to the questions I had. And I feel very inspired and motivated to come up with a good plan for how I'm going to be healthier. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Esther, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been excited about this.
Oh, me too. I really look forward to picking your brain about this topic because I think I might have some misconceptions about dieting. So, why don't you start us off? So, you are a weight loss coach and you help moms stop being all or nothing and lose weight easily and sustainably. So, tell me a little bit about yourself and yourself as a mom. So, how old your kids are?
Yeah, I have a 5.5-year-old son. That half is very important. And he is currently in T-ball, in soccer. I'm getting my first real taste of
Oh,
having
sports
after
life.
school activities every day.
Yes,
Yeah. You
yes.
posted something recently about like how expensive baseball equipment is. And I had the exact same reaction. I was like, I'm sorry, how much is a bat?
Yeah.
And he's 5. He needs to wear a cup, all the things.
Oh,
So
yes, the cup.
And so he doesn't actually have to wear it. He has to have it. And now he tells everybody who will listen, I have a
Mhm.
cup to protect my penis.
Yes,
Which, yes.
yes. I love the time when my 4-year-old took my 9-year-olds out and had it on his face like a space mask, like breathing through it. And I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah,
Welcome
right.
to
Of
the
all
world of
things to put
sports.
there, but it does look like it goes there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, like fully immersed in, school-aged kid now. And I've been working in the health, fitness, weight loss industry for almost 20 years. Really, I went to college for exercise science, have been personal training ever since. And, my career has sort of evolved based on, my personal needs. Because
Yes.
I relate to being all or nothing with my approach and, trying to be quote unquote perfect and then falling off the wagon and all of that. So a lot of what kind of led me down my career path was trying to get answers for myself of how come, I know what to do for workouts, but I'm struggling to see results. How
Hmm.
come I can get a few good days under my belt and then I fall apart? And
Yes.
that's really what led me to the creation of my Gone for Good program and the coaching that I do now, which is really full spectrum. Yes, exercise is important. Yes, nutrition is important, but there's so much more to it than that. Almost everybody at least thinks they know what to do, but they struggle with actually implementing it. And
Yes.
that's what we need to solve for is how come I can't string together enough days in a row to see any progress. So that's really the meat and potatoes of what I like to dive into is the lifestyle, the mindset related stuff that makes the what to do so much harder to actually do consistently.
That was such an aha because I feel like that is the piece I am missing. Like I have learned like healthy things that you should be doing. Why can't I stick to that? That is, oh, okay. So that was one of my questions was you wrote that 10% of people actually keep the weight off. Is that why? Because we don't have that mindset piece to keep it going. We don't have the habits.
That's a huge piece of it. Yeah. Most of us are so focused on getting to the goal that we don't have any sort of strategy once we have.
Mm,
And there's all sort of like the mental baggage of, kind of the fear of succeeding, the fear of failing, all of that stuff is just kind of jumbled in there. But largely, yeah, we just aren't taking a long-term outlook or a long-term approach to reaching our goals is we're just very focused on, I'll figure it out when I get there. And then we don't, but we rinse and repeat
Mhm.
and keep trying the same thing over and over again and wondering why it's not working. So it's a combination of the approach we take to get there, that we're so focused on what'll make the scale drop fast,
Yes.
that we overlook the fact that if we're miserable and counting down the days until we can stop and go back to what we were doing before, it's never going to last.
Yes.
And really stepping into the identity of a fit and healthy person. A lot of times we've struggled with our weight for so long that even when we find success, we still feel like we're, kind of like the fat person masquerading as a skinny person. And we're
Oh,
just sort of like waiting to be found out. And a huge part of long-term success is really becoming that healthiest version of yourself and realizing like this is the real me.
mm,
And to prioritize health as just a value in your life, that once the goal is no longer to see the scale move, that turns into such a mind bender for people. It's like, well, how do I gauge my success? What keeps me going if I don't have the scale to tell me that I'm doing it right or that I'm succeeding? So it's all of that kind of like mess that
yeah.
makes the maintenance piece so hard.
Whoa.
And obviously the state of, the country, in that most people are overweight and unhealthy and struggling to know what to do about it. So it's like when you compare yourself to the norm, you might be thinking like, well,
I'm
not
doing
that bad
fine.
off.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really sort of all of that, and recognizing like if I want to have results that most people won't, I need to be willing to do things that they aren't.
People
And
don't.
that means, being sort of the black sheep saying, no, I'm not going to drink tonight. I'm going to come out and I'm going to have fun, but I'm not going to drink. To, yeah, sometimes wake up early and get those workouts in, to be the mom who's getting a walk in at the sideline of the soccer game.
Mm.
It's those things that make it so hard. But I don't want like the message to be like it's overwhelmingly
It's
hard,
so
you just can't do
hard.
it. But it is possible. Use that 10%, not to say like, well, I'm probably not going to be one of them, but to say if 10% of people can do it, so can I.
What can
What
I?
are they doing that I'm not? What are they doing that most people aren't? And how do I start doing that myself?
Yeah. Oh my God, there was so much in there that just like, aha, aha, like the believing that you are the person. Cause like all my life I was, I've always felt like, oh, I'm a bigger girl. I'm taller. I've got bigger hips. So to think of myself as the healthy person, it's the mindset shift. Yeah. And then just the fact that it's just so much easier to be unhealthy. It's like there's the fast food, there's the snack bar at the game. To switch and say, I don't have to choose those options. Oh man, there's
That's
a
exactly
lot.
it. And just that what you said right there, I can choose, something else. I'm choosing that. It seems insignificant, but the words we use really do make a difference. Because
Hmm.
if you're telling yourself, if every time the kids are getting fast food and you say no, they go to the snack bar and you say no, I can't. If you're telling yourself, I can't, I can't, I can't, it feels terrible. Right?
Yeah. It feels
And it ends up being
limiting and
right. And it ends up
excluding.
being
Yeah.
all that you want because we've got this kind of rebellious part of our brain that's like, well, I'll show you. And that's when we, have the all part
Yes.
of all or nothing. And just that shift to today I'm choosing not to. Next time we're at a game, I might choose to get some things. Today I'm not. And when you can take that more gradual approach and the understanding that you're never going to be perfect, you don't need to be,
Hmm.
but it's what you do, it's the choices you make most of the time that matter. And you see that how much better you feel when you make those better choices more often, and then how much you can kind of get away with when you do want to indulge because you have that foundation of consistency to fall back on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you work with a lot of moms. That's what like drew me to you. Cause I'm like, if you're a mom and you're busy, like, how to fit this in like mom life. So one of the questions I had is what do you do? Like, how do you lose weight when you feel like I just don't have the time? I don't have the time to work out, to meal prep, to track my food. Like, how do busy moms fit this in?
Great question. So first of all, take it all the way back. You need to be connected to why you want to lose the weight in the first place. A lot of times we just say it because it's what we've always said. It's because we feel like
Hmm.
women are supposed to say, and we don't actually have that much of a connection to why it really matters. So get really clear on how is your life going to change for the better because you are working towards this goal? Why is it important enough that it is worth making the time or finding the time to do the things? Because the reality of it is, and people don't like to hear this, but we do find the time, the money, the energy for the things that we really want.
Right.
And often the way we use those resources is not a very good reflection of the people that we want to be, right? We say that we're so tired and we don't get enough sleep, but the new season of Love is Blind comes out and we can't help
We're up till midnight.
right, exactly. Like I've been there. And, sometimes it's having that sort of tough love conversation with yourself and saying, if someone who didn't know me looked at the way I'm spending my time, money, and energy, what would they think is important to me? Same thing, like if if you say you value family time, but you are constantly on your phone responding to emails when you're supposed to be playing with your kids, if you can't, shut it off at family dinner. So I think that's important just for the foundation is why do you need to reach this goal? And maybe it's not weight loss, maybe it's something else health related, but why is it important? That's number one. Number two, the reminder that you can find the time. That first of all, it probably doesn't require as much time as you're telling yourself it does if you're using that time effectively. But there are a lot of moms out there with similar lifestyles who have figured out ways to make it work. And again, I'm not saying that to compare in a negative way of like, yep, just another reason I'm falling short and failing everybody. That's not it. But it should be inspiring that, okay, that means it's possible.
If
People
she
who
can
are
do it,
doing
I
the
can do
thing.
it.
Exactly. So that's why you kind of look to other people. So one of the things that I specialize in is helping simplify exercise and nutrition, because a lot of the overwhelm or a lot of the trouble getting started comes from the overwhelm of feeling like you have to do so many things.
Yes.
And if you're not doing all of them, why even bother? It's not going to work. So when you're like, well, I keep hearing about intermittent fasting, I should probably be watching my carbs, and I keep hearing about macros, I should definitely be tracking my food, and I need to be getting in, an hour of cardio every day, and you just like pile on.
Then I choose not to do it because it's too much.
Right, it's too much. Of course it is. And you like legitimately, other things would suffer if you did kind of take that approach, which you've probably seen in the past. So what I focus on with clients is mastering what I call the big rock habits, which comes from that sort of visual of like, if you want to fill an empty jar, the most efficient way to do it is put big rocks in first instead of like pouring sand and pebbles and it takes forever. So that's what most of us do. We're dripping, a grain of sand in the jar at a time. And we're like, why isn't the scale moving?
Not seeing any difference. And then we give up. Yeah.
Exactly. So why not focus on the most impactful things first? So what I've identified is 3 exercise and 3 nutrition habits that give you the most bang for your buck. And you don't need to implement them in any specific order. Some of them you may already be doing really well, in which case pat yourself on the back and focus your energy on the others. But what I find is that when you focus on less, you're able to make those things feel like habits more quickly, and you're better able to pinpoint what obstacles are standing in your way. So, and if you guys are listening and you're interested in these habits, I have a habit tracker that you can download for free. That one of the most effective ways to build a consistency is like a simple sticker chart for a grown-up, right? To just be able to see.
I was going to ask you, what's your favorite tracker? So, okay,
yeah,
we can get it. And it's a printout. So you
print it out? Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And you just stick it on your fridge. I personally use a version of it anytime I'm trying to build new habits. So you can download that. I'm sure you can put the link in the show notes. So for your exercise, your daily movement in the form of how many steps are you getting, strength training, rest and recovery. Those are the big rocks. Some of you might already be walking, 8,000 steps a day. Great. Keep doing that. Leave well enough alone. Don't stress about, always trying to do more. Once you're doing that, you want to be getting in your steps pretty much every day. And, obviously it doesn't need to be the exact same, but shooting for about 7,000 plus is a pretty good place to be. 3 full body strength training sessions, roughly 30 minutes apiece.
Per week or per?
Yes. Okay. Week. I like to keep it super simple because the reality of it is it's the consistent showing up that works.
Yeah.
You don't need the perfect exercises. You don't need the belly blasting, whatever. You just need to keep showing up. So 3 strength workouts is solid. It's a good place to start. A day or two of rest where you don't do anything strenuous. You can stretch, you can do yoga, do the restorative stuff. But the idea is that you're giving your body a chance to recover, which is when you actually benefit from the workouts. If those are the only things you focus on, you are going to be successful. If there's other stuff that you enjoy, you have a Peloton or you go to Orange Theory or like Pilates, of course you can do that stuff. But those are more like pebbles than big rocks. So once you have made the plan for how you're going to do the most important stuff, then fill in the gaps with the other stuff. So then I take a very similar approach to nutrition, which is that when you are trying to lose weight, whether you like it or not, how many calories you're taking in matters.
Okay.
And we can talk about food tracking and all of that if you'd like. But at the end of the day, whether or not you are counting them, they still count. So having some sort of awareness of how much energy, that's what calories are, how much energy your body needs, and how much energy you are taking in, that matters. And if you don't really know that, like I have no idea, I eat stuff and I move and like I have no idea, that's where tracking can come in. It's just a tool to develop awareness. It doesn't need to be this like obsessive, time-consuming thing. It's just how do I kind of shine the spotlight on something that has previously sort of like been in the dark, kind of murky, like I don't really know.
Mhm.
So calories do matter. The other 2 nutrition big rocks are your fiber and your protein intake.
Okay.
Those are going to help both with satiety. Protein is going to help you preserve muscle while you're losing fat so that you don't end up with just like the skinny, flabby version of yourself. And then fiber is just sort of like the proxy for eating an overall nutritious diet. I wholeheartedly believe that we should not be sacrificing our health in order to lose weight. There are plenty of people who are, and plenty of ways to approach it so that you do, but you don't need to. So generally, when I talk to women, they say, I want to lose weight, but I care more about being healthy. So we got to figure out how do we do both. And fiber is a cornerstone of that because it's hard to get in enough fiber if you are not actively prioritizing fruits, veggies, whole grains, legumes, that sort of thing. The average North American takes in about half the fiber per day that's recommended.
Whoa.
Yeah. So we want to shoot for about 25 grams a day. More is fine. And most of us get 12 to like 14 grams. So it takes an intentional effort. And this is probably the biggest sort of, I don't like to use the word overhaul because it's not that drastic, but this is the biggest change to start looking at the labels, start paying attention to the fiber content rather than the carb content, things like that. So what I find is that when you just focus on those 6 things, you get incredible results without the overwhelm, without the stress. And like I said, they don't need to be done all at once right away. The best thing is you can approach it 2 ways. One, you can say, what's like the low hanging fruit? Which one feels the easiest for me to implement right away? If you're a busy mom, short on time, don't try to do all of them at once. It's going to feel like too much. So just pick, you know what, I'm already getting, 5,000 steps a day. I think I could get myself to 7 relatively easily. Sometimes the best approach is the one that just helps you build momentum and feel good and want to do a little bit more. Alternatively, you can say, what's the habit that's going to give me the most bang for my buck? If you have been resisting tracking your food, but you're not losing any weight and you're frustrated, dialing in your calories is going to give you the most bang for your buck and help you see the result that then helps you feel motivated to keep going. And then the idea is that just over time, you focus enough on each one that you're able to do them all relatively easily most of the time without it taking a ton of time or energy or effort.
So with tracking your food, is it just literally just writing down everything you eat? Is that how you do it?
So you can. I'm a fan of, especially because we're all short on time, we don't want to be doing things that are just busy work or aren't as useful as they could be. So I'm of the mentality that if you're going to do something, do it the most beneficial, the most practical way. So if you approach food tracking in the sense of this is a tool that I'm using to develop an awareness to help me reach a goal that I care about, that feels way different than I gotta download the stupid app and I gotta weigh everything in like if you go into it resenting it, you're not gonna have the best experience. Right. So what I would say is You can develop some awareness from just writing down, I had, a Starbucks muffin for breakfast. You're going to learn more quickly if you do use a digital app. Like I use my Fitness Pal, the free version is fine, because from that, you're able to learn about portion sizes, calorie content, macronutrient breakdown, all the stuff that will expedite the process to you reaching your goal and feeling like you can maintain it without tracking forever. So, with any tracking that you do, photos is another one. I have a friend who's a mindful eating weight loss dietitian, and she doesn't focus on calories and macros, but she has her clients take pictures of their
Oh,
meals.
that's a different, I've never heard of that approach. That's
Yeah, so
interesting.
that's an interesting one as well. But the real benefit is that you look back at what you're tracking,
Mhm.
however you're doing it. Most of us do it to check the box and then we move on and then we're just like, God, I still can't hit my protein goal. This is too hard. And then we give up. But the point is, look back and see like what are the foods that I'm eating that have a lot of protein or have a lot of fiber? What are the foods that I'm eating that have more calories than I realized? And use that information to then change how you do things going forward.
Mhm.
So if you're just like a write it down and forget it, probably not going to make a huge difference. But if you decide I'm going to commit to this for however long, 3 days, a week, a month, 3 months, whatever, and I want to learn as much as I can in that time, it can really be eye-opening and then help set you up to be successful in the future without needing to continue to use that tool forever.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes it makes me more accountable too. Like if I want to grab a handful of chips, I'm like, I'm gonna have to log that. And I don't know if I want to log that. So maybe I won't grab those chips.
100%. That's one of the quickest benefits. Almost everyone experiences that, and I have as well, where it's just like it's not worth the effort. Like if I have to get out the scale or if it's take out the phone, like forget it. I don't
Mhm.
want them that bad. And it does. It kind of cleans up your act right off the bat. And that's a good thing to know is that, okay,
Yeah.
when I'm paying closer attention, that I can easily, nip a lot of this mindless snacking in the bud. That's an easy way to just eat less.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Let's talk about some more like maybe misconceptions, maybe truths, things that when I think of dieting, this is what comes to mind. Um, I am over 40. And I remember for years, people said, just wait till you're 40, your metabolism will just stop and you cannot lose weight. Is that possible? Or is that true? Or are there ways to lose weight post 40?
Such a good question. Also, you don't look post 40 at all.
Well, thank you.
Um, yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so a lot of things there. Absolutely, you can still lose weight post 40. What's really interesting is I feel like the age just keeps creeping lower and lower. Is I'll see women on social media who are like, ever since I turned 35, ever since I turned 30,
21. Oh my gosh, it's so hard.
exactly. I'm like, all right. So, you know, perimenopause is a legitimate, thing that
Mhm.
affects everything. I think very often age and hormones become scapegoats where it's like, we don't really want to do anything. We don't really want to change anything. We just want to commiserate with other people who are also not taking meaningful action. So it just becomes this sort of like echo chamber of, I know it's so hard once you're post
Easy
40.
excuse. Yeah.
Right. Which, nobody likes to hear. But again, there are plenty of women who are thriving in their 40s, 50s, 60s, beyond.
Yeah.
And if they can do it, so can you. There's nothing wrong with you. Your body is not broken. And there are just like these myths that get perpetuated. If your metabolism was broken, if your metabolism stopped, you'd be dead. That's not a thing. Yes, they are adaptive. And when you chronically undereat for a long period of time, your metabolism downregulates and essentially is like finding ways to conserve energy because you're
Oh,
not giving it much energy. But if it can downregulate, it can also upregulate. So you haven't done this like permanent damage to your metabolism. It's not very severe, even when you are in a state of metabolic adaptation. What generally is happening is we are not paying attention to the slight changes to our lifestyles that affect our activity level and our food intake. So I'll give you an example. I just saw this on Instagram before we were recording. There's a coach who I follow who has kids who are, I think, like eight or nine now. And she was saying that for the last roughly 8 years, 6, 7 years, whenever she would go hiking, she was carrying one or both of her kids
Mm-hmm.
most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're bigger, they can hike on their own, they can stay, they can be elsewhere if she's hiking. And she was like, now hiking feels like too easy because I don't have
Easy.
this additional weight that I'm carrying.
Yes.
So it's things like that. It's things that you don't realize when you're carrying around your 30-pound toddler 6 hours a day, that you are expending more energy than you are when you're sitting on the sidelines of t-ball games for
Right.
3 hours. So
Yes.
there's these subtle changes that we become less active. Often we're in a better place, socioeconomically. Maybe we are making more money. We can go out to eat more often. We can vacation more often. Maybe we do more leisure activities. All those small things. We feel like nothing has changed, but it has,
Mm-hmm.
because the research suggests that our metabolisms are pretty steady until we hit our 60s. So we have like 2+ decades in there of physiologically not much has changed, though we would like to
Yeah.
blame it. But what's changed is our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So the the takeaway here is that the same rules still apply, whether you are 40, whether you are in the midst of perimenopause. You still need to be in a caloric deficit. Protein actually becomes more important as we age. You still need to be strength training. Again, as we lose muscle as we age, that becomes even more important. So the what to do, pretty similar.
Mm.
That's not to say there aren't any additional challenges where, in perimenopause, when your hormones are fluctuating, you may have strong cravings or feel like you are a bottomless pit and you just like are never satisfied. You're always hungry. You're having trouble sleeping. All that stuff can affect how easy it feels to lose weight, but it is not directly causing weight gain, and it doesn't mean that you cannot do anything about it.
That is very good to know. And I think part of it too is like, I've been hearing this from so many women that you kind of take it as truth. Like, oh, well, now I'm over 40. I can't lose it. And it's like, maybe that's not the truth. Maybe,
Right.
I don't have to believe that.
Exactly. And doctors are feeding into that. Couple months ago, I was having headaches. I went to my doctor and she was like, "Well, you are of the age that it could be related to perimenopause." And I feel like it's just kind of become this like blanket explanation for
For
everything
everything.
women middle age
Yes.
experience. And I'm like, I still have regular periods. Like it's not that, but it just becomes the go-to explanation.
And
And
there's no
going back,
solution. It's just, I'm sorry, you have that. Too bad.
ex
So sad.
exactly. And that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of like kind of the 90% versus the 10%. It's like the majority are saying really defeatist things like that of like, oh, this is just what happens. There's nothing you can do. Just try to work on dealing with it. You need to be willing to like not buy into that and to say it is possible. I have these
Mhm.
examples that it can be done, and I want to be one of them. So I'm going to stop listening to these voices. I'm going to remove myself from the places that are making me feel like there's nothing I can do about my health.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. You mentioned metabolism, and so it made me think of intermittent fasting. So I actually see a thyroid doctor and I was talking about weight loss stuff. He's like, "Why don't you try intermittent fasting?" I do that as this 40 something year old very thin man. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's something that I feel like is newer and I've never really looked into. What are your thoughts on fasting?
Great question. One of my favorite things is whenever I hear somebody talking about fasting, I just replace that word with not eating, because that's what fasting
That's
is.
what it feels like. And it's like,
So,
is that help? I don't know.
right. So when you have people who are saying, "Oh yeah, I fasted for, 72 hours this week." Okay, so you didn't eat for half the week? No wonder you lost a little bit of weight. So I think, like everything gets taken to extremes. Most people when they're referencing intermittent fasting are talking about something like a 16-hour fasting window where you don't eat and an 8-hour window where you do, something along those
Okay.
lines. What it boils down to for weight loss purposes is that you have fewer opportunities to eat. You're likely eating less. There's some science behind, eating according to kind of our circadian rhythm and how our ancestors were eating, when they woke up, and then they went to bed early, so they weren't eating for, the chunk of time that it was dark out.
Yeah.
there's sort of all of that. And there's the argument that when we were hunter-gatherers, there would be periods of time where we didn't have much food, so we didn't eat
Mm-hmm.
much. So there's sort of that evolutionary piece. But I think the way the interest most women have in it is, will it help me lose weight? Is it this
Yeah.
like magic bullet that is going to make the pounds melt off? Because that's what all these
Yes.
people claim. It is a useful tool for some people. If you naturally don't have much of an appetite in the morning, or you're super busy and it just, is easier not to, that might, work for you. I would argue that most people probably are better off with eating something earlier in the day because of the effect it can have on your cravings later. But the easiest way to implement something fasting like is to just decide you're not going to eat after dinner. And that's not because eating late in the day is bad for you or immediately turns to fat or any of that nonsense. It's just that most of us don't need those calories. We're not having a late night salad or, a late night chicken breast. We're we're having chips, we're having cookies, we're
Yeah.
having ice cream, we're having the treat stuff. And that hyper palatable stuff is calorie dense. It's low satiety. So you just end up going, trips to mouth over and over again. You're easily taking in hundreds of calories that you don't need.
Mm.
So a lot of the time, if you have tried fasting and you see benefits from it, it's that you just cut out that mindlessness in the evening. And you can get that without feeling like you're rigidly tied to, oh, it's 7:07:05,
Cannot have
I have
another
to
bite.
stop. Exactly. So
Mm.
that might help. Um, there's also like nothing magic about, the 16 hours or 12 hours or whatever. And in fact, there is some evidence to suggest that prolonged fasting may not be the best for women and our hormones. And that if you are interested in trying it, starting off with something more reasonable, like 12 hours. So I'm going to eat, from say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Again, you're losing that mindless snacking. That can
Mm-hmm.
be a way to ease yourself into it and see, how do I actually feel? Um, the other thing I'd say is you want to be mindful of how you're treating your feeding window, the time that you're, allowed to eat. Because if it turns into a free for all where you're just like, I fasted, I can eat whatever I want, it's pretty darn easy to eat
That's
a
not
day's worth
gonna
of
work.
calories in a small chunk of time, right? There's a lot of calorie
Mhm.
dense foods out there that you can easily, get yourself out of a deficit, even be eating a surplus of calories in the middle of the day. And then I think the last thing I would say on it is there's never any harm in experimenting. You want to be the expert in your body. You want to hear things and try them on and see if they work for you. But you also want to do that in a flexible way where you don't feel like you're married to the dogma of a particular approach. And you can say, I tried that, it didn't work for me, or I liked this piece of it, but not that, and come up with what works for you. So, for example, I don't consider myself an intermittent faster, but I just sort of naturally, right now anyway, don't eat my first meal until like 10 a.m. after I've dropped my son off at school, gotten a little bit of work done. And then I don't eat after dinner because I know I'm not hungry. I don't need those calories.
Mhm.
So I don't look at like how long it's been, or, I don't identify like in that group, but it works for me at least right now. So no harm in trying it, but don't expect that it's going to be this like magic thing when in reality, it just, for some people, makes eating less easier.
Yeah. So I think this is where it's so conflicting because you hear stories of intermittent fasting works and breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So then you're like, what am I supposed to do? So it's just,
Right. No wonder nobody wants to take any action because you don't want to do
yeah,
the wrong thing. Yeah.
we're so confused. Okay. What about weighing yourself? Like I've heard some people say, weigh yourself every day so you can keep yourself accountable. Like you see little successes, and others are like, don't use a scale. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. This, again, so much on social media just gets taken to both extremes, and
Mm.
the loud voices on either end of the spectrum
Yeah.
drown out the reasonable people in the middle who recognize that, like most things with health, it's nuanced. It depends. I personally haven't been on a scale since I was pregnant. My son's 5.5, so it's been like 6 years now. I knew in early pregnancy, it's going to just get in my head to see that number get higher and higher, even though I
Mhm.
know there's
Yeah, it's
literally a human
supposed
growing in
to,
there.
but it's
Right,
weird. It's weird seeing
right,
that number.
right. And I just never went back. I knew, early postpartum still wasn't going to benefit me. And I'm perfectly happy without it. I have other ways that I gauge whether I'm in a good place or whether I need to make some changes, largely what I look like in the mirror, how my clothes are fitting. Those are the main ones. And just like general self-awareness of have you have you been eating a lot of peanut butter from the jar lately? Maybe rein that in. So that's what works for me personally. My head coach, Meg, is a good friend of mine. She uses the scale every day. She likes having it as a little bit of external accountability and as that data of, obviously there are day-to-day fluctuations, but for her to see like, okay, I'm creeping up towards the top of my
Mm-hmm.
sort of happy
Comfort
range.
zone. Mm-hmm.
This is time for me to make some changes. Ultimately, there's no right or wrong answer. And we have clients in our Gone for Good program who are doing all of the above, who don't use it at all, who use it every day. What I would say seems to be the sweet spot for most women who do want to use the scale is 3 or 4 days a week, where it's not that daily sort of sets the tone for the day type situation,
Mm.
but it's not so infrequent like once a week where you feel like you have so much riding on that number
Mm.
and you have no idea if you're getting an outlier. A lot of the frustration comes from, I was the exact same as I was last week, or I was, 4/10 of a pound heavier. And what you didn't see is that every single day it was
Up and down.
fluctuating and you just happened to catch an up day. So I feel like 3 to 4 is the sweet spot where you get the benefit of being able to see the trends, look at the weekly averages, compare to the previous week, and look at the trends over time without it being so in your head. And the other thing I'd say with that is to make sure that if you're using the scale, you also use it in conjunction with other ways to gauge progress so that you're not putting all of your
All of it on a
success
number.
on the number, right? That you're able to say, okay, I'm taking my measurements, I'm looking at photos, I notice how my clothes are fitting. And more important than any of that is that you're keeping a list of your non-scale victories. You're just taking notice of the things in, your day-to-day life that are better, that you're proud of, that, you haven't needed your mid-afternoon coffee, that you hit a PR on your Peloton, that you were able to
Mm.
zip up your boots over your calves, that changed belt loop, all that stuff that feels good for like a second. And then we go back to, but I'm still not where I want to be. So documenting that so that over time that list is growing and growing and you're able to see I may still be frustrated with the scale from time to time, but I have this growing body of evidence that what I'm doing is working at improving my health and changing how I look.
I love that. I love that it's not like you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. Because you hear
Yeah.
that a lot where it's like,
Yeah.
cannot use the scale. No, you have to use the scale. This is kind of like you work and adapt it to what you need and you
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that's so spot on about pretty much all of the weight loss industry. And it's so frustrating because there isn't a one right way and everything else is wrong. And I think even though we tell ourselves, I just want to be told what to do. I just want there to be rules. I'm a people pleaser. I'll do what you tell me
Mhm.
to. We say we want that, but that's not what we need. And that's not what's benefiting us. At the end of the day, you need to be in the driver's seat of your own life. You need to be the one calling the shots, not without guidance, not without support, not without accountability, but you get to decide this is going to help me or this is going to hinder me. And someone else dictating how you need to approach something so personal is just so silly. Like it really does need
Yeah.
to be led by the individual.
That's what makes it sustainable when you have the
Right.
power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ugh. Okay. So afternoon munchies. Like boys come home from school, they all want a snack, and it's like there's a bag of chips. How do you make better choices and avoid those like cravings for chips and crackers? And because it's in the
Yeah.
house with the little
This is
boys, I've got the fishies, and I'm like, how do you say no to the fishies?
I can so relate to this. This is the habit I just recently had to work on kind of getting out of my life because it easily slipped back in because the availability, like it's just
Yeah.
there. It's always in front of your face. The first thing I found makes such a difference is making sure that you are actually eating substantial and well-balanced meals earlier in the day. There's this not illogical belief that, well, if I'm going to be snacking in the afternoon, because I always do, I should try to eat as little as I can until then so that I don't eat too much overall, which I guess like makes sense mathematically on paper, except that we are not robots and that is rarely how things shake out. What ends up happening is you're ravenous because you've been existing on
Bad
caffeine
choices.
and carbs all
Mhm.
day. And now the snack foods are out and you're just like, I'm starving, I can't even think straight. You eat half the tub before you even
Yes.
notice. and then you beat yourself up about it. So the thing, and I have experimented with this time and time again. Our clients experience it all also. If you have a breakfast that is, 400 plus calories and has 30 grams of protein, has, 5 to 10 grams of fiber, has a lot of volume to it. So, for example, my breakfast is a combination of eggs and egg whites, a ton of veggies, sweet potato, avocado. I've eaten it every day for years because I love it, but it keeps me full for hours. And then if you actually eat a lunch, most of us, lunch is like this forgotten meal where you're just like, I'm scrambling trying to get stuff done in the 5 hours that my kids are
Yes.
gone, and I don't
It's
need
already
to.
pickup. It's already pickup.
Right, exactly. So lunch is just an afterthought. I've started making myself a sandwich and an apple and baby carrots and yes, a serving of chips for lunch. And depending on the time, sometimes I eat it at home, sometimes I eat it in the car, sometimes I eat it at the playground. But I found that when I have an actual meal, well, surprise, I'm way less hungry for
Yeah.
snacks. And when I build in a serving of something that actually feels, kind of indulgent, like I do
Mhm.
popcorners, I really like those, but you could do goldfish, like whatever strikes your fancy. But if you're building them in as a thing that you regularly eat instead of something that you're trying to tell yourself is off limits, it just loses its luster. And you're just like, whatever, I had
Mhm.
I had goldfish already. I don't need more goldfish. I'm good. So those things, that sort of pre-work makes a huge difference in reducing the cravings that you experience later in the day. That said, those snack foods are created, they are engineered to be tempting and to be tasty and to have us going back for more. So
Mhm.
even when you're not physically hungry, when you're around that stuff, you're still going to want it. And that's where a term I use in coaching a lot is parenting yourself, which all moms can relate to. Sometimes you need to parent yourself the way you would a kid. When, you're making dinner and they're saying like, "Mom, can I have a snack?" And you're like, "No, you can't have a snack. We're going to be eating dinner in 15 minutes. Like, just go do something else." Sometimes you need to treat yourself the same way, where your brain is like, "I want a snack." And you're just like, "Well, too bad. You're not having a snack. You're not hungry. You're going to eat dinner in a little bit. Too bad."
Yes.
So sometimes you just need to do that to yourself and deal with kind of the tantrum in your brain. And it gets easier as you stop, indulging in it every time. You're just like, "Oh, you know what? I said no yesterday and I survived. I said no the day before and I survived. Like
Get it.
I'm doing okay." And then sometimes there's that practical stuff of, put in a piece of gum during, like the witching hour when you think you might be
Mhm.
tempted, or storing that stuff out of sight or hard to reach. So if it's for kids, putting it on like the bottom shelf where it's not at your eye level
Yeah.
when you open up the pantry. Buying the single serving baggies. I know personally, if we have the big bag or like the Costco size,
So much
once
more.
it's open, all bets are off. What's
Yeah.
a portion? Nobody knows. But if I spend the extra dollar and I get the individual baggies, I'm not gonna open myself a bag of those. I'm a grown up. Like I'm not, So just like
I'm not gonna take 2 or 3.
right, exactly. Like those small kind of psychological tricks you can play on yourself, those kind of the practical and the mental combined is what will help you overcome things like cravings in the afternoon.
I loved that example because just last night my son was like, "I want a bar." I'm like, "I am making dinner. We're just about to eat." And I went to go grab something and I was like, "I just told him he can't eat. I cannot be eating." I need to tell myself that.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, so funny. Okay, give me some examples of good proteins that I can add because I keep hearing this come up over and over, like make sure you're getting enough protein, and I know I probably do not. So what are like your go-to proteins?
Great question. So I like you may have picked up on about me, I like to keep things simple. So I repeat a lot of meals, not because they're like the only safe foods or anything like that, just because it's
It's easy.
easy to be repetitive. And when you want something different, you can have it, but you might as well just, let it be easy on yourself. So eggs and egg whites are my primary protein source in the morning. Afternoon, I do a lot of deli turkey meat. That's my main source in the afternoon. Dinners are where we get our variety. So I'll grill, chicken breasts, pork loin, salmon, any sort of white fish, ground beef, ground turkey, things like that. I feel like oftentimes it's not the meals so much that people struggle with, where those, like you've probably heard all those. You probably know, yeah, I make sure we get a protein and a veggie at dinner, things like that. Where I feel like is the biggest opportunity is in the grab and go foods, where you realize you've been on meetings all day and you got to go pick up the kids and you're not going to be home for a long time. So you grab, like a granola bar or something,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just getting carbs and fat. It's not going to keep you satiated for long. Plus, it's tiny. So what I think is super helpful is to just stock the fridge and pantry with easy protein sources. So for me, that's Greek yogurt. There's a really good, I want to say it's Chobani brand. It's a vanilla mixed berry.
Okay.
So good. So we have those on hand. Again, the deli turkey meat, string cheese, shrimp cocktail. You can spring for
Oh,
like the
never thought of
pre-done
that.
platter,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
shrimp are like straight protein. One shrimp is like 5 grams of protein. You pop 4 of those in your mouth, you're good to go. Hard-boiled eggs. I make a batch of those at the beginning of the
Love
week. I
those.
put one on a salad or just, put some mustard on, pop in my mouth. Smoked salmon. I like to do that as a little treat, just because it's a little pricey. It's not like, not a treat for any other reason. But that's an easy one. Jerky, that's another one. So I find that if you're going to be doing, some kind of mindless munching anyway, if you are going to be snacking on something before dinner, make it so that when you open the fridge door, you have 5 different protein options in your face. And instead of getting hundreds of extra calories from goldfish, that's not really doing much of anything for you, you're getting an extra 10, 15 grams of protein and actually helping yourself out. So I think that can help a ton. Cottage cheese is another one. I'm not personally a fan, but I know it's kind of having a moment right now. So those are really the biggest things. Is like kind of letting that be your list and making sure that you have those things on hand for when you need them. Last one I'm thinking of, edamame. You can buy it that it's
Oh,
frozen. You steam it in
yeah.
the pod.
Yeah.
It's a great protein and fiber source.
Did not know that. And my
Yeah.
kids like that. Oh my gosh.
Same. I know. It's like I
Yeah.
like don't want to tell him how good it is for him because I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to ruin this. But yeah, that's a great one. And the fact that they're in the pod slows you down a little bit. So instead of just like taking a handful and popping
Yes.
them in, it's a little bit more of like an experience and it takes
That's
a
a
little bit more
good
time to
one.
register that you're eating something.
Yeah. I like the idea of grab and go protein because my thought was scramble up some eggs or do chicken at dinner, but I never really thought like, oh, something that you can eat as a snack, protein as a snack. Oh, this
Hmm.
is great information. Okay, you keep talking about like this has this amount of grams and this. I don't know how to like do that. Have you just because you've been doing this over the years kind of figured out like, oh, an egg is approximately this? Or do you have the app that tells you that? Like, how do you know how much protein you're getting in your day?
That's such a good question. Yeah, it is a mystery to a lot of people. And
That's exactly how it is. It's a mystery to me. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. So one easy thing that you can start doing right away is just looking at the nutrition labels
Okay.
and ignore like the percentages on the far right because they're based on the recommended daily allowance, which for protein is really kind of lower than is optimal.
Oh,
It's set,
interesting.
yeah, it's really quite annoying. It's set to avoid deficiency, which like of course we want to avoid deficiency, but it's
Oh,
not it's not the optimal amount for an active adult who wants to lose weight, that sort
got
of
it.
thing.
Oh, that's so good to
So,
know. Didn't know that.
right? Yeah, so ignore the percentages, but just generally start to get a feel for what is the package saying is a serving and how many calories is that? How much protein is that? I look at, and I talk about calories and protein with my son all the time because it doesn't need to be this like emotional thing. It's just
Hmm.
a unit of energy. Yeah, a unit
Yeah.
of measurement that measures energy. But it's similar to me to teaching him about dollars and coins and things. It's just something that we are better off knowing. And it's not that I have my 5-year-old counting calories, but he's
Hmm.
developing an understanding of, how does this compare to that sort of thing. So just looking at labels and seeing, all right, so it says that the jar, a serving of peanut butter is 2 tablespoons. Well, what does that look like? Let me get out my tablespoon or let me
Probably
put it on a food
less than
scale.
what I'm used to
It
putting
is
on.
so
It's
much
so
less than you would
different,
think.
eye-opening.
That's a very upsetting one.
Like
But
one spoonful is like my one finger dip is
yeah,
one
it's like half
serving.
a serving. Yeah. So that's how you do it. Like, yes, it does take a little bit of legwork, but again, it's not for no reason. It's for you to
Mhm.
educate yourself so that then you don't need to, because you then, like me, sort of have that in your brain.
Right. It
So
becomes
yes,
habit. Like,
right. And you develop that like innate
yeah.
knowledge of, I know that, an egg is, 70 to 90 calories, depending on the size, that it's got, 5-ish
Mhm.
grams of protein. That just lodges in your brain like song lyrics. Um, but yeah, the best way to develop that is to spend some time tracking and actually looking at the entries and, scanning a barcode and seeing what it says, or looking something up and being like, wow, these shrimp are basically 100% protein and they're low calorie.
Did
That's,
not
that
know
makes a good
that.
staple. So yeah, that is how. And then, there are tons of resources available. I have macro cheat sheets. That's basically a list of however many lines you can fit on a page, 25, 30 primarily protein foods, and how many grams of protein are in, say an ounce or something like that.
Okay.
So there are ways to sort of like shortcut and get that information right away. But yeah, most of it just comes from some experience and some time saying
Okay.
like, I want to learn this and I'm going to pay attention to it.
Okay, this is probably a silly question. Does macro mean protein? Is that what that
Macro
means?
is short for macronutrients. So
Okay.
those are the categories of food that our bodies need in large quantities. So you've got your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fats. Alcohol doesn't fall into any of those categories, but it's not considered a macronutrient because our bodies don't need it. But that's sort of a separate category. But so when you hear macros, it's just referring to protein, carbs, and fat.
Got it. Okay.
And where, again, when I was walking through the big rocks, the reason I don't talk about carbs and fat is because for weight loss purposes, if your calories are equal and you're prioritizing protein, how your carbs and fat shake out doesn't really matter. So a lot of times tracking can feel overwhelming because you feel like you're trying to play Tetris, where you're just like, oh, I need 7 grams of carbs and I need 3 grams of fat. Like, what is this unicorn food? So it's just a lot easier if you just focus on the stuff that matters and let the other stuff, kind of fall out where it may.
You said focus on calories and protein. Those are the two. Okay.
Those are your top two. And then fiber, we call the final frontier because it's it often does feel the hardest. And also you're gonna see the results from the caloric deficit, whereas the fiber is more of an emphasis on making sure you're satiated and eating nutrient-dense foods.
Got it. Got it. Oh my gosh, this is so much helpful information. Did I miss anything? Any misconceptions that like you hear a lot that did I miss anything?
This was awesome. I love this interview because this is how I treat interviews on my own podcast, is just getting to pick somebody's brain, like for my own interest that other people get to benefit from. So it's really cool to hear sort of what's on your mind. I would say the only thing that's coming up for me is just a reminder or a reiteration of what healthy and sustainable weight loss looks like, because there's a lot of noise on social media making you feel like if you're not losing 5 pounds a week or you're losing, 20 pounds a month, whatever, that you're failing or that there's something wrong with you. Healthy and sustainable weight loss is in the range of 0.5 pound to 2 pounds per week. And what that is largely
just
dependent
feels
on.
so much better. 0.5 pound a week. Like that sounds doable.
Right. And that's so interesting that would be a reaction, because that goes to show how important our thoughts are. That somebody else might hear that and think 0.5 pound a week, it's going to take me years to reach my goal. So the fact that we can hear the same piece of information and have 2 different reactions to it is so important. And we can decide how we want to think about things. So instead of fixating on it's going to take forever, focus on that feels really doable. I can do that as a busy mom. Right. If you set the bar somewhere that feels within reach, like we're not trying to jump to the 10th rung of the ladder, we're trying to grab onto the first one. And once you're there, one at a time. Right. So largely that's dependent on how much weight you have to lose. We're looking at like 0.5% to 1% of our body weight each week. So if you have more to lose, you might lose more quickly. And like we were talking about with the scale, keep in mind that it's not linear, that you might lose 3 pounds the first week and be like, all right, this is going to go so fast and be easy. And then next week it's 0.5 pound, or then you're up 1 pound. That's just what it looks like. There's no on or off track. It just is a process. It just takes time. But when you anchor yourself to something that's realistic, it feels way, way better, instead of just feeling like every week that goes by, you're getting further and further from reaching your goal.
Oh, I love all of this. Okay, you have a podcast called Live Diet Free. Tell us a little bit about that and also where we can find you.
Thank you for asking. So yeah, I've been hosting. We're about to hit 200 episodes, and it's a lot of conversations. Yay. Thank you. It's a lot of conversations like this. I have really been very much myself. So when you listen to my episodes, you're going to hear the same me, We talk about the exercise, the nutrition stuff, but there's a lot on the larger, mindset and lifestyle stuff. I have guest experts who come on and talk about boundaries and time management and self-talk and body image and all that stuff that we were talking about at the beginning. I have interviews that come out every Monday, and then every Thursday I do a bite-sized episode, which is just like a 10-ish minute kind of clip answering one specific question. How do I eat more protein? How do I lose weight and not be hungry all the time? That sort of thing. So if you like short, we got them. If you like longer, we got them. And I would, like I mentioned earlier, I do have that habit tracker that if you are wanting to get started with any of this stuff, please feel free to download it. I believe it's go.esteravant.com/habits.
Put that in the show notes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so, so helpful.
Thank you so much for having me. This has really been a delight.
Special thanks to Esther for answering all of my questions. I really, really, really enjoyed this conversation. Very eye-opening about some things I thought about dieting. And I feel very motivated now to get some habits going and see some positive changes. So if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you check out all of the links below for how you can find her habit tracker and connect with her. And I want to remind you before next week that everyone burns their first pancake, so just keep looking.